Hi, it's Rick here from the CAD Jewelry School, and in this lesson we're going to look at using the hoop tool to build some hoop bearings in Panther. We're going to place some gemstones and run some cutters to create a pair of hoop earrings. So let's get started. So just open up Panther and start with a new drawing. If you've got something open, you can just click on New File to load a new blank template. And we'll start off by going to the jewelry section here, and in the first row, the fourth icon along is the hoops tool. So just click on that. Now this will place a single hoop bearing. Obviously when we're finished we can just mirror that or copy that and duplicate it to make a pair if you want to render that or show it to someone. But for 3D printing purposes you could obviously just print just one file and specify that you want a pair of them. The first thing is I'll just leave the start position where it is. The end position is just where it comes up to close, so you can drop that up, drop it down. I'll just leave it here at about 0.8. We've got a default shape. This is the internal shape, if you like, the internal shape of the hoop bearing. So we've got square. In fact, we'll use a square hoop for this exercise, and there's also a drop shape there. I won't go through all the parameters in here. That's covered in one of the other videos that explains the hoop earring tool. The inner height and inner width just refers to the width left to right on the inside and the height top to bottom. So it's 25 millimeters. And we'll come just to the profile settings here and we'll just adjust the width. We'll put some 2mm stones in here. So let's just adjust the width of this a fraction, make it say 2.3mm wide. The profile height is the thickness, if you like. We'll just leave that as it is, and I think everything else we can leave. The smooth cap just refers to the end of the hoop, so you can extend that if you want, round it off sort of a little more. I'll just leave it where it is. And you can, for 3D printing purposes, switch off the wire and the post and switch those off if you want, and you can solder a post on after 3D printing, for example, but I'll leave it like that again for rendering. You'll probably leave that on. So let's say OK here and click the check mark to close out of the hoop bearing tool. Let's now go over to the Gems tab, and we'll use the Gems on Curve. And the nice thing again with the Gems on Curve is that it will recognize geometry in your drawing. So if you've used one of the Panther tools, like in this case the hoop bearings, it recognizes that there's a center line down the top surface and allows us to very quickly place some stones along that rather than having to create a curve for that to happen. Now we can orient them. So if you select to orient it to the hoop earrings there, they'll spin around the right way up. And again we can adjust a few parameters here, like the start position. So there's a start point. I can just drag that across slightly, maybe just a fraction more. Pull it back a bit. That'll do. And there's an end position as well. I'll just leave that where it is. That's okay. The other thing we can do is come in and select the gem size. So currently 1.5mm stones. Let's make them 2mm. And let's just drop them down in position. So in the gem sizes we can adjust the length and width and the overall height of the gemstone, if you like. In the Gem Options tab we can actually set the placement. So by default there's a spacing of 0.2 between the stones. That's fine for the default, but they're aligned at the moment to the girdle. So let's just change this and align to the table, because again these are going to have cutters going across the face of them, so we want them sitting in the metal a little bit deeper. You can come in and change gem cut and shape. Again, I won't do that. That's covered in one of the other videos that explains the hoop bearing tool. So let's just say OK here and click the check mark to close out of that. The next thing we'll do is place some cutters. So if we come to the Cutters tab, you'll see again in the first row, the fourth icon across is Micro Cutters. So we'll just click on that. And it will ask us, if we haven't got the gem selected, it'll ask us what we're placing the cutters on. So just click this little icon here to select the gemstones. And you'll probably find it's placing cutters between, you know, each of the stones and also along the face of the stone. It's probably easiest just to come to the front view to see this a bit better. So click down here in your front tab and let's scroll in a bit here. And maybe if we go to the wireframe mode, you might see this a little bit better. I know it's hard to see the stones. Actually, in the ghosted mode is probably better. We can see the stone girdles there. So the default cutter is this sort of trillion shape, or I like to call a guitar pick. So you can change that. So you can come in and select, let's say you want it a round, or let's say we want a more square profile. Let's select that, something different. And the cutter across the face of the gems, we can adjust the width of that. So let's just drop that down a little bit. Actually, it's the opposite way, I've noticed. Don't know if that's a little bug or just the way the tool works, but the cutter width will make a bit narrow as we've done there. The length, the vertical height, let's move this up a bit. Just a fraction more. That will do. It's sort of at the same alignment as the cutter in between the gemstones. So let's just leave that as it is. Let's come to the cutters in between the stones. They're called micro cutters. And again, we can adjust their width, their height, and their vertical position. I'll just pull them up a bit, and we might adjust the length of them. They refer to as the height. I'll just make them a little bit longer. So that all looks okay. So we've got 0.35, 0.8, and 0.2 for the micro cutters. I think that's all alright. So let's just click the check mark to say OK here and close out of that tool. If we come back to our perspective mode, you'll see the cutters there visible, and we'll do a Boolean difference with those in another step just to remove those. So why don't we just next place the channel cutter. So we need a cutter that goes along the length, if you like, of the hoop bearing there. So let's come to our top view. Let's go back into our ghosted display mode here. And I know there's a lot going on here with the other cutters there, but in the ghosted display mode, at least we can see the stones there. So let's come and select the channel cutter here. Again, if you've got the stone selected, it will know what you're trying to do, but if not, just click here to select the gemstones. And just come back to your perspective view, just to have a look at this. And what we're going to have to do is adjust a few parameters here. The first thing is the cross-section profile. So the default profile is like a V shape in the bottom. Let's just change that to be more square. And we need to adjust the width here. So come to the channel tab, and it's the lateral distance is what the width is actually. If you come to the top view again, it might be easier to see. You can see there the width. So it's lateral distance. If you just drop that down, it doesn't need to be too wide, because the yellow area that you see there is really what's going to be left of our prongs, and that's going to be holding the stone in. So we want to make sure that it's coming in a little bit over the girdle of the stone. In fact, I'll make it even a fraction narrower, probably too narrow. I'll leave it at that. So mine's minus 0.4. If we come back to the perspective view, or in fact, well, let's come to the front view to have a look at this. What we're looking for is, it's hard to see, but again, I think if we just go into our wire display mode, we'll be able to see through. Yeah, and what we're looking at is that little green line here. That's the underside of the cutter. So just make sure that's not too low. I can actually move this up probably about there is okay. So what I'm doing is just making sure the other cutter that's cutting across the face of the stone is not lower than that channel that it's going through the middle there. And that looks okay there. I'll come back to the perspective view. And I think the only other thing just to check is where this cutter ends. So this should be stopping just back where this other cutter ends. So let's come back to the front view. And this is actually what's called the caps. So if you click on the tab there, or the section called caps, we can adjust what that end looks like. So the start cap, I'll just pull that back a fraction. You can see now that's lined up with that final cutter across the stone. And we'll do something similar as close as we can to the other end. Here, we'll pull that back a bit. That's it. And I think that's it. So let's come back to our perspective view. So you can see we've got all our cutters in place, and we're going to be doing sort of a scallop cut, if you like, is what these cutters are doing. So let's just click the check mark or OK to close out of that tool. And now we've got a channel cutter, we've got our micro cutters going across the gemstones, and we can now do a Boolean difference. So what we might do is come to the Tools tab and select Boolean difference. This is the Panther Boolean difference, what they call smart Booleans, and the reason for that is that we can actually select objects to do a Boolean difference with, and we can come back later and be able to edit them. So let's just select the hoop earring first. So if we click this drop down box, it'll give us the names of those items. So here it says hoops, so let's click on hoops to subtract from those. And object B, if we come down here, we can select the micro cutters, and that will just take a few moments to process. And it's done those. Now you can see the area that we're going to have left over for the gemstones, so I should say for the prongs there, and we'll just repeat that. So we'll just click the check mark to close out of that, and we'll do another Boolean here. So we'll click the Boolean difference tool again, and in object A, what we're subtracting from, we'll select the hoops, and in object B here, we'll click the little drop down box here, and we'll select the channel cutter and just press enter. There we go. So that's it. The only other thing that you might want to do, in fact, it is a good idea to do, is just to create a seed cutter for the gemstone. So let's just do that. We'll close out of the Boolean tool. Let's go and select the gems. You can click on gems, or you can actually select different objects from this list here. So we know that's gems on curve. If I just click on that, it will select them. If I want to edit that, I need to come over here to the little icon there to allow me to edit it. Okay, so clicking on one of these will select the item. So we've got the gems on curve selected. We'll come back to the cutters tab, and we'll use a gem cutter. So the gem cutter looks at the geometry of the gemstone and creates a cutter for that. What we definitely want to do is adjust the girdle offset. I'm going to just drop this back a little bit so it's not as big as the girdle. We'll make the cutter just a bit smaller so that that can be right cut at the end. You can leave the cutters coming all the way through the back there, but it is a fairly thin strip of metal, so what we might do is let's just come to our front view, and you can see this a little bit better. So the girdle offset is offsetting away from the actual girdle of the stone, so the cutter's actually smaller than that, which is important because when you're setting, you want to brighten that seed up and cut away a little bit of metal, so you better have less or more metal there than not enough. The other thing is not the crown, the azure, what they call the azure, the depth. If you reduce that back down, we can adjust the taper at the bottom as well. That's it. I think we'll leave them like that. So the cutter's not cutting to the full width of the stone, and it's cutting just a bit shy of you know, the base of the gemstone there. So we'll click check mark and say OK here. And let's come back to our perspective viewport. And I'll just click on the grid to deselect the stones, and we're going to do one final boolean. So we'll come back to the tools tab, and in the third row the last icon there is boolean difference. For the object A, or the first object we're subtracting from, click the down arrow and select the hoop earrings again. And for object B here, again, if you click the down arrow there and select the cutters, you can just press enter, and that will go away and do the boolean for us. It does take a few moments, so and that's done. So that's basically it. We'll close the boolean tool. Okay, so let's just duplicate this earring. So let's mirror this object, or this earring. Let's just scroll out a little bit, and I'm just going to hold my left mouse button down and draw a bounding box around all of the hoop earring, and I'm just going to drag it using the gumball just to the left hand side a little bit. And just to explain this, why don't we just come to our front view. In fact, we need to come to our right view. So now we're going to mirror this on the opposite side. So if we come to the transform tab, in the second row there's mirror. Now this is for the start of the mirror plane. Now that's going to be 0, where our green and red axis meet. So just type 0 on your keyboard, press enter, and just hold down the shift button and just move your mouse upwards, and it will mirror it on the opposite side. I'll just click on the grid just to deselect that. And now you can see we've got our two copies. If we come to our perspective view, see there are our two earrings. So let's zoom in on our earrings here, and if we come to the rendered display and come to the second tab next to the panther icon there, it's a gold sphere that will allow us to select different metals and materials. So let's come in here and select metals, and let's select both the earrings, holding shift to select both of them, and let's change them, let's say, to white gold 10 carat. So just click off on the white background there, and you'll see that's applied. And if we wanted to, we could come here and select, let's say, a different ground plane. Let's come to grounds here and let's select black marble. And if we come to ray traced, you'll see it will start rendering those earrings. And if we click on the render button here, I can save that. And it will render my current viewport and save that when it's finished. Now it just depends on the speed of your video card. If you've got a recent computer, say from the last year or two, obviously it's going to run a bit quicker than maybe a computer from 3-4 years ago. So it just depends on the performance of your graphics card or NVIDIA video card in your computer, whether that's a laptop or a desktop computer. So I'm just rendering at a smaller size. It's 800 by 600, which is fine for sort of emailing to someone. That's it. If we have a look at that file, you'll see that image there. So again, you can adjust the resolution to increase that for a larger file size, and you can also adjust the samples. Generally about 500 is probably pretty good. You don't need much higher than that, but it will take a little bit longer. So it passes over the rendering quite a number more times, and will generate a better resolution image, or a better looking image I should say. Okay, that's it for that exercise.